The scent of burning rhinoceros horn, forbidden and alluring, drifted through the air. They said that its smoke, clinging to clothes, allowed the living to commune with the dead. "I once had a little dog," the woman murmured, her slender fingers threading through the raven hair of the young man nestled in her arms. Her voice was like the whisper of silk. He was so soft, so obedient. "You remind me of him." The young man Changqiu lifted his head from the crook of her neck, his beautiful eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Sister," he breathed, "I am your little dog." The woman Su Yan chuckled softly, a hint of disbelief in her tone. A feverish blush stained Changqiu's pale cheeks. Eager to prove himself, he blurted out, "Anything he could do, I can do too." He lifted her delicate hand to his lips, his tongue tracing the lines of her palm. Tilting his head, he saw the amusement flicker in her eyes, the tip of her tongue peeking out between her teeth as she formed the words. "Good boy." Su Yan's arrival in Maytown had been a disruption, a splash of vibrant color against the backdrop of incessant rain. She carried a simple parasol and a small, wicker suitcase, the heaviest item within being a block of fragrant wood. Her beauty was striking, a stark contrast to the cool indifference in her expression. A shifty-eyed man had been sent to meet her. He watched, bewildered, as she took the key to the old mansion without a word and walked away. His initial surprise at her aloofness quickly morphed into guilt. After all, he'd been party to a deception. Su Yan offered no explanation. In her profession, 3 phrases were taboo: hello, goodbye, and rest in peace. The mansion, a relic of the Republican era, stood apart from the traditional architecture of the water town. Its Western-style facade a jarring but beautiful anomaly. Su Yan found it easily. Unlocking the verdigris-covered brass lock, she pushed open the heavy wooden doors. Their dark crimson paint a testament to their age. They seemed to regard her, this uninvited guest, with silent scrutiny. But Su Yan felt no intrusion. She moved through the 3-story mansion with the air of a returning owner, exploring each room with leisurely grace. Despite the overcast sky, the interior wasn't gloomy. Su Yan switched on the lights, admiring the Western murals, her fingers trailing over the Chinese rattan chairs, her gaze lingering on the intricate wood carvings adorning the window frames. The house, a fascinating blend of East and West, had been preserved perfectly, a snapshot of a bygone era. Electricity and running water had been restored, the rooms meticulously cleaned, the linens fresh. Everything was to her liking. Money, as they said, could make the devil dance. The locals had initially refused to set foot in the mansion, whispering stories of its haunted past. But Su Yan's generous offer had quickly changed their minds. Within 2 days, the house had been transformed. Su Yan knew the stories. She knew that someone had died here. She wasn't foolish. A property this beautiful at such a low price hinted at a darker history. But she remained unfazed. As a mortician, she spent more time with the dead than the living. And she feared the living far more than any ghost. Yawning, she entered a bedroom on the 2nd floor, setting down her suitcase and shedding her rain-dampened coat. Beneath, a figure of breathtaking sensuality emerged, her curves accentuated by a form-fitting cheongsam. Her gaze fell upon a small incense burner on the bedside table. A flicker of thought crossed her face before she retrieved a piece of fragrant wood from her suitcase. With deliberate slowness, she shaved the wood, lit it, and placed it in the burner, covering it with the lid. The journey's fatigue finally caught up with her. Kicking off her shoes, she lay down on the bed, falling into a deep sleep without even pulling up the covers. The gentle fragrance of burning wood filled the room, lulling her into a deeper slumber. A shadowy figure began to coalesce in the air, its face etched with confusion as it watched the beautiful woman sleeping soundly on its bed. Her bare ankles peeked out from beneath the covers, the tips of her toes tinged with pink, pale blue veins tracing delicate paths across the skin. The figure tilted its head, then reached out a trembling fingertip, gently brushing against her foot. Su Yan stirred but did not wake. The shadowy form dissipated instantly. The rain outside abruptly ceased. Only Su Yan, lost in sleep, remained. Su Yan had been a mortician for 10 years. An orphan with few attachments and a naturally detached personality, the profession suited her. She had walked out of high school and straight into the funeral home. She needed to earn a living. It wasn't that she hadn't wanted to continue her education, but she couldn't bear the press of crowds. They suffocated her. Literally. From 17 to 27, She dedicated her life to the meticulous rituals of death. The work was repetitive. Washing and massaging the bodies, draining fluids, injecting preservatives, reconstructing damaged features, applying makeup, manicuring nails, shaving, and finally, dressing them in their final attire. The time it took depended on the state of the deceased. The early days had been unsettling, but she possessed a rare talent, adapting quickly and soon becoming one of the most skilled morticians in the city. Her ability to restore a semblance of life to the dead was unparalleled. She was less a makeup artist and more a sculptor, piecing together fragmented lives. But after 10 years she'd had enough. Her final case had been a personal request from Lao Wu, a colleague from the crematorium. He asked her to prepare his mother's body, offering a piece of fragrant wood as payment. Suyen accepted. The old woman had died peacefully in her sleep, a fortunate passing. Everyone deserved a dignified exit, and Suyen performed her duties with meticulous care. After bowing deeply, she noticed something peculiar. The old woman's hands, initially crossed right over left, were now left over right. Both she and Lao Wu were satisfied with her work. As she packed her tools, Suyen's expression remained impassive. She'd seen stranger things. Lao Wu told her that his mother had specifically requested her services. He'd even consulted a fortune teller, who advised her to travel south for a change of scenery. He recommended Maytown, his hometown. Suyen was indifferent to location. The photographs of the mansion in Maytown had captured her attention, and soon she was living within its walls. News of the beautiful woman who'd moved into the ghost mansion spread quickly through the town. Every few days she'd visit the market to buy supplies. People kept their distance, their fear palpable. But Suyen was a generous customer, and the vendors were happy to take her money. No one argued with prosperity. Suyen relished the solitude. She severed ties with the outside world. Her days a quiet rhythm of simple meals, incense, tea, and books. She lived a life of almost monastic simplicity. But the evidence was undeniable. The mansion was haunted. Her clothes wouldn't wash and hang themselves, nor would the stove cook meals and set the table complete with chopsticks and spoons. If there was a ghost, Suyen mused, it must be a remarkably domesticated one. She found the situation amusing. She pretended not to notice the ghostly activities, and the ghost in turn grew bolder, its efforts to please becoming increasingly elaborate. Suyen found its naivete endearing. A normal person would have reacted differently, but her feigned ignorance had been taken at face value. They coexisted peacefully for 2 months. Then one night, the ghost climbed into Suyen's bed and slept, nestled against her shoulder. The next morning Suyen woke with a stiff neck. She decided it was time for a house meeting. The topics of discussion: unsolicited body control and unauthorized bed sharing. But the ghost was shy and elusive. Drawing it out wouldn't be easy. Suyen was a patient woman. She allowed the ghost to cuddle with her for several more nights, feigning sleep even when its fingers intertwined with hers. The tactic worked. Apart from those first 2 nights, it refrained from further attempts at possession. The rainy season had descended upon Maytown, the streets perpetually damp. The wind and rain were particularly fierce that night. Suyen made a decision. Tonight, she would catch her ghost. Dressed in a silk slip, her expression serene, she extinguished the bedside lamp and closed her eyes, her breathing gradually evening out. The incense in the burner continued to smolder. The rumble of thunder echoed through the room. After a while, a pale hand gently caressed Suyen's cheek, lingering there with a strange tenderness. The ghost had returned. Suyen's eyes remained closed, but she was wide awake. The unknown often breeds fear, but Suyen felt a thrill, a strange excitement. The ghostly hand traced the contours of her face before its owner climbed into bed, snuggling against her warmth. Its body was icy cold. It nuzzled its head against her neck, its soft hair tickling her skin. Like a puppy, Suyen thought. Rather endearing. Its fingers laced through hers, and it finally settled down, seemingly ready to sleep. But then it abruptly recoiled, scrambling out of bed in a panic. In the darkness, Suyen raised her left hand, examining it closely. She heard a faint scuffling sound from the stairs. A sly smile curved her lips. So it was hiding there. Suyen switched on the lamp, her fingers pushing her hair behind her ear. The attic was unlit. She grabbed a decorative lamp and barefoot ascended the stairs. The attic was filled with dusty relics. Su-Yan's gaze swept across the room, finally settling on a dark wooden chest tucked away in a corner. She chuckled softly. I see your tail. Are you coming out, or do I have to drag you? The corner of a white garment, peeking out from beneath the lid, quickly retreated. Su-Yan almost laughed aloud. The ghost was so clumsy, so utterly endearing, that she almost felt bad for continuing the charade. She threw open the lid. Curled up inside, his hands covering his face, was a young man. He trembled slightly. Su-Yan was taken aback. She'd expected a child, a ghostly apparition. Instead, she found a young man, dressed in a white cotton shirt from the Republican era. Barely an adult by the looks of him. Weren't you bolder when you were climbing into my bed? She asked, her voice laced with amusement. Why so shy now? She saw his ears twitch, turning a delicate shade of pink. He was blushing. Su-Yan pretended not to notice. She stifled a yawn. Well, if you're not coming out, I'm going back to bed. The figure in the chest stiffened. His hand shifted slightly. He seemed to have reached a decision. Slowly, he lowered his hands, revealing a delicate, almost ethereal face. His eyes, large and luminous, were filled with unshed tears, his cheeks flushed. He stared at her with the wide-eyed innocence of a lost puppy. A wave of dizziness washed over Su-Yan. Something shifted within her. A primal urge, a sudden, overwhelming desire to possess him, to make him hers. His face, every line, every curve was perfect. In that instant, she forgave him every transgression, every ghostly intrusion. She extended her hand. Others kept dogs. She would keep a ghost. How novel. The next morning, Su-Yan awoke with Changqiu still nestled in her arms. She'd been too tired to ask questions the night before. Simply holding him close as sleep claimed her. Even now, his skin was cool to the touch. What's your name? She asked, her eyes still closed. He stiffened slightly. Changqiu, he whispered. Changqiu. Su-Yan drew out the syllables, a hint of amusement in her voice. From the poem, stroking the long sword, jade earrings chime. The sound of jade and jewels resonates? Changqiu mumbled an affirmative, nuzzling his face against her shoulder, his arms tightening around her waist. I like yin yen, he murmured. I like yin yen. Su-Yan's lips curved into a smile. Her eyes remained closed. And what do you like about me? She asked. He looked at her with adoration, his eyes soft. Yin yen smells nice and she's warm. Su-Yan finally opened her eyes. She gently tilted his chin upwards, her gaze playful. I'm hungry. Changqiu was remarkably capable. The longer they lived together, the more comfortable Su-Yan became with giving him instructions. She abandoned her books, preferring to spend her days with Changqiu, cradled in her arms. Perhaps because he was a ghost, he seemed weightless like a large, affectionate dog. Despite being taller than her, he willingly curled up against her, content to be held. Yin yen, he'd murmur, his voice tinged with a childish sweetness. Call me sister, Su-Yan would correct him gently. Although Changqiu had died nearly 100 years ago, he had been only 18. She was 9 years his senior. Changqiu would twine his fingers in her hair. His reply swift. Anything you say, yin yen. Su-Yan knew he was being deliberately obtuse. He only used the term sister when he wanted something. Curiosity finally got the better of her. What was Changqiu like before? Changqiu was always willing to talk about the past. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling deeply. What does Yin Yin want to know? Su-Yan looked down at him, her gaze unwavering. Why are you here in this mansion? A look of profound sadness settled over Changqiu's features. I was sick, Yin Yin, he whispered. Very sick. They didn't want me. They left me here. And so Su-Yan learned about Changqiu's past, the story of a lonely, neglected boy. He had died in the summer of 1925. His mother had succumbed to complications after his birth, leaving him frail and sickly. The doctors diagnosed him with asthma, a manageable condition, especially for a family as wealthy as the mice. May Town, after all, was named after them, the vast stretches of land belonging to the May family. The Grand May estate, located in the heart of the town, had been Changqiu's home for only 3 years. When he was 3, a wandering Taoist priest had declared him cursed, destined for an early death, and prophesied that he would bring misfortune upon the family. Already neglected by his father, this pronouncement sealed his fate. He was banished to a small house on the outskirts of town. At 13, his health deteriorated further. His father, after 10 years of absence, reappeared, not to offer comfort but to imprison him. The plague was sweeping through the region, and his father suspected Changqiu was infected. Unwilling to kill his own son outright, he had a mansion built outside town, a gilded cage for his unwanted offspring. Changqiu had lived in the mansion for 5 years. Despite having servants, he was often left hungry and alone. Fearful of contagion, they would leave his meals cold and unappetizing, forcing him to learn to cook for himself. Perhaps it was sheer will to live, but Changqiu survived the plague. His health, however, continued to decline. The Taoist priest returned, bearing a gift for Changqiu's father. But it was a gift that held no meaning for Changqiu. The priest's return did nothing to alleviate his suffering. He died shortly after. He remembered the year, 1925. He had just turned 18. News reached his father that Sun Chuanfang's army was approaching. He fled to Shanghai with his family, leaving Changqiu alone in the mansion. The servants, sensing impending chaos, deserted him. He was too weak to leave his bed. "So you died of your illness?" Su Yan asked softly, stroking his back in a rare display of affection. Changqiu shook his head. "No." Su Yan fell silent, a grim possibility forming in her mind. Changqiu, as if sensing her thoughts, shook his head again. "Not starvation either," he whispered. He lifted his head from her shoulder, his eyes welling up with tears. His voice trembled as he spoke. "I was murdered, Yan Yan. I was so scared. They put wet paper over my face, one sheet after another. I couldn't move. I didn't know who it was. I didn't want to die. Yan Yan, I was so scared, but I couldn't do anything." His body trembled, as if reliving the terror and despair of that moment. Su Yan knew the method. It was an ancient form of torture. Wet paper, applied to the face sheet after sheet. By the 5th sheet, the victim would suffocate, the death appearing peaceful, leaving no visible marks. Su Yan hadn't imagined such a cruel end for him. He continued to weep, his face flushed with grief, clinging to her like a frightened child. "Sister, don't leave me. Don't leave Changqiu," he pleaded, his voice choked with sobs. "I can't leave this place. If you go, I'll never find you again." Su Yan didn't reply. Her hand slid beneath his shirt, her fingers tracing the lines of his back, his waist, his stomach. His body was hypersensitive to her touch. His cries softened into whimpers, his face flushed with a mixture of shame and arousal. "Sister," he moaned softly. Su Yan silenced the rest of his cries with a kiss. After that first intimate kiss, Changqiu's devotion became even more pronounced. He constantly sought her affection, his innocent eyes pleading for another kiss. Su Yan indulged him, her kisses languid and teasing, but even as their intimacy deepened, Changqiu remained insecure. He yearned for a promise, a reassurance that she wouldn't leave. Su Yan saw his anxiety but offered no comfort, her attitude a confusing mix of affection and indifference. Her thoughts remained a mystery. Changqiu was desperately lonely. He couldn't bear the thought of being alone in the mansion again. Whenever Su Yan stood by the window, gazing out at the world beyond, he longed to reach out, to touch her, to hold her close. He remembered her story about the little white dog, how she had loved it for its obedience. Her affection was conditional. She was like mist, intangible, impossible to grasp. He had to be good. He had to be obedient. That night, as they lay entwined, their kisses growing increasingly passionate, something shifted. Su Yan had been drinking. Her touch was less hesitant, her kisses more demanding. Changqiu felt her lips trail down his neck, her fingers unbuttoning his shirt, exploring the skin beneath. He gasped, a soft moan escaping his lips. In the darkness, their bodies moved together, their shadows dancing on the walls. Changqiu awoke to an empty bed, the lingering warmth the only evidence of Su Yan's presence. "Yin Yan," he whispered, his voice thick with sleep. Panic clawed at his throat. He searched the mansion frantically, calling her name over and over. When he couldn't find her, he sank to the floor, his eyes brimming with tears, his voice rising in a desperate cry. "Yin Yan." The mansion remained silent, offering no answer, no comfort. His face twitched spasmodically, his eyes wide with terror. Then he heard the front door open. Su Yan entered, carrying a bag of groceries. She raised an eyebrow at the sight of him huddled on the floor, his eyes red and swollen. Still asleep? She asked dryly. She walked past him, ignoring his distress, and entered her bedroom. As she shed her coat, she felt his arms wrap around her waist. He was trembling. His tears soaked through the fabric of her dress. Su-yen wondered absently if ghosts could cry. She turned to face him. Tears streamed down his face, his expression a mask of anguish. Yin-yen, don't do this. You can't do this to me, he sobbed, his voice thick with despair. The more distressed he became, the more exhilarated Su-yen felt. She cupped his face in her hands, her lips brushing against his tear-stained cheeks. She licked the salty moisture from her lips, her eyes gleaming with a strange intensity. Cry louder, she whispered, her voice husky. Changqiu stared at her, his tears momentarily forgotten. A look of almost predatory fascination crossed Su-yen's face. You're so lovely when you cry, she murmured, her voice laced with a disturbing tenderness. She nipped at his chin, her voice barely a whisper. So pathetic, so lovely. The sweet, woody fragrance of the burning incense filled the room. Changqiu's cries intensified. Su-yen began leaving the mansion more frequently. First it was every week, then every few days, and now every other day. She returned later and later each night. Changqiu would greet her with tears, clinging to her desperately. First Su-yen seemed to enjoy his dependence, soothing him with gentle words and caresses. But her patience began to wear thin, her responses becoming perfunctory, almost dismissive. She was too detached, too aloof, as if always on the verge of departure. Her erratic behavior tormented Changqiu. He felt sicker than he had ever been, even when he was dying. He was consumed by anxiety, desperate for her presence, yet unable to resist her pull. One night, Su-yen returned late, her face etched with fatigue. Changqiu pressed his cheek against hers, careful not to cry, afraid to upset her. After a long silence, she spoke. I'm leaving tomorrow. Changqiu was stunned. He thought he'd misheard. He kissed her cheek, his voice pleading. I'll cook you dinner, Yin-yen. Please. Su-yen turned to face him, her gaze unwavering. I said, she repeated, her voice cold and clear. I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm not coming back, Changqiu. This is goodbye. Why? He whispered, his voice muffled against her chest. Is it because Changqiu has been bad? No, Su-yen replied calmly. It's because I don't want to stay anymore. It wasn't him. It was her. That was all. She stroked his hair, oblivious to the chilling transformation taking place in his eyes. The usual softness had been replaced by a dark, unsettling intensity, a flicker of madness. His yin-yen wasn't being obedient. He hadn't wanted to hurt her, but she'd left him no choice. Sleep well, my yin-yen. As midnight approached, Changqiu stood over Su-yen's bed. She lay asleep in the same bed where he had died. His gaze was fervent, almost worshipful. He leaned down, his lips brushing against hers in a lingering kiss. The fragrance in the room intensified. In his hands he held a stack of wet paper. He smiled, a chilling, unsettling smile, as he carefully placed the sheets over her face, one by one. As the fifth sheet covered her mouth and nose, the clock struck midnight. Good girl, Yin-yen, he whispered, resting his head on her shoulder, a sense of profound peace settling over him. Changqiu will stay with you now. Yin-yen, my yin-yen. When you wake up, you'll never leave me again. Changqiu waited expectantly through the night. But as dawn broke, his hopes crumbled. He was alone in the mansion, with nothing but a lifeless body to hold. Where had Yin-yen gone? He didn't understand, just as he hadn't understood how he had woken up next to his own corpse all those years ago. He clutched Su-yen's body close, his face twitching uncontrollably. Everyone left him. No one stayed. His father hadn't wanted him. Yin-yen hadn't wanted him. His father had chosen Changjue, his brother. Yin-yen had chosen freedom. Neither of them had chosen him. He had always been unwanted, always alone. He carried Su-yen down to the cellar, a dark, hidden space beneath the mansion. His father hadn't allowed him a place in the family tomb. His coffin had been prepared when he was 13, a grim reminder of his impending death. It was a cruel kindness, a constant shadow hanging over his life. He didn't know whether to hate his father for casting him aside or to thank him for providing a final resting place. A place where he and Yin-yen could decompose together. their fates intertwined for eternity. He opened the coffin, gently placing Su Yan inside. He closed the lid, the sound echoing through the empty cellar. He remembered watching his own body decay, the skin turning mottled and purple, the maggots writhing in the putrid flesh, the slow, inevitable transformation into bone. 100 years had passed. Nothing remained but bones and hair. Yin Yin would be the same. Changqiu's form began to flicker, his face strangely calm, his eyes burning with a desperate madness. Yin Yin, he whispered, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. A slender hand reached out, gently wiping away the tear. He heard a soft sigh behind him, a woman's voice laced with amusement. Why are you crying? His tears flowed freely now, his body trembling with relief. Cool arms wrapped around his waist. Su Yan's lips brushed against his earlobe, nibbling gently, her eyes blazing with possessiveness. His Changqiu was so foolish, but she loved him for it. Silly Changqiu, she murmured, her fingers tightening around his neck, her voice thick with satisfaction. I never bought a ticket. She kissed him, her voice a seductive whisper. And I never had a dog.